Hey, it's Kyley.
And it's Eva.
Welcome to Hello Universe. Okay, we have kind of an interesting episode for you, which is that Eva and I are going to have a behind the scenes conversation, but we're hitting record.
Yeah.
Because we think that it will be relevant and interesting. But basically we scheduled a time on our calendars to have a conversation about what it looks like to grow the podcast. And as we were getting ready for the conversation, we realized that a big part of what we wanted to talk about is like, what's the balance between kind of being and doing as it relates to kind of creating something material into existence, a la growing podcast audience. So that's the intention that is set for this conversation.
Totes.
Anything you would add?
I mean, just essentially, like, we are having a business meeting. Like, this is what we kind of schedule. We're like, we want to have a business meeting, and it's not going to be like, this isn't about like recording an episode. Like, we just want to, and we have business meetings every so often to be like, hey, let's touch in and see like how we doing and how can we, like, what are we excited about? How do we want to improve? And so we're like, well, why don't we just record it? Because I mean, with the high potential that like this could be also helpful and interesting for other people who want to see like who want to be having this conversation with us. Because for context, there's so much context here. I think the context is like we really want this podcast to be one of the main pillars of both of our businesses.
Yeah.
Like, we love Hello Universe so much.
Yeah, we love Hello Universe so much that really what we would like is that this is the audience we show up for above anything else, right? Yeah. I mean, energetically, might already be true, but our intention is to grow the podcast to a size where we roll into our podcast, and this is the space in which our clients come to us, and then content is created, just plucked out of the podcast rather than its own kind of content creating machine. And so, yeah, we fucking love the show. We want it to be huge. Yeah. And so that's
we want to be huge. I think that's like a good way to put it.
I mean, the first like 10 episodes is me talking about wanting to interview Brene Brown. That dream has not died, everybody. So
totally alive and well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think I just want to speak to the fact that I think this also stems for me from the space of like, there's so much like I would really like my life to be, in this work, to feel easeful and fun and joyful. And like, Kyley and I just don't like doing things that we like. We're not really willing to do things that we don't like doing, at least, right? Yeah. Would you say that that's true for you?
That. Yeah.
Like, that's the whole point. I mean, like, if I'm going to go through the hassle and like all the work and intensity of running my own business, then I should at least be able to do it in the way that I want to do it and have fun and do whatever the fuck I want to do. Like, yes, that's the perk of it, right? So, because it is really hard running your own. Meaning, there's like I think there's a lot of like people feeling really idealized about running your own business. It's like, you can work whatever hours you want, and you can, but also like it becomes like so personal. Like, you can't walk away from it like you're like 9-to-5 job.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I think this is one of the spaces that we both like get the most delight out of showing up for, we've spoken often about that. And so I think like allowing this to become even more and more a pillar of our businesses just feels really nourishing and fun,
Yeah. And I think supports the ethos of like how we run the show and also how I want to run my business. It's like, let me just do more of what is life-giving and do less of what is not.
Right.
And I think when both of us checked in, we were both like, oh yeah, the podcast is it for us.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And also, I believe in this podcast so much. I don't know if you even listened to it yet, but I actually left you a message. You probably didn't, because you're in Taiwan.
No, I did listen to it. I didn't have a chance to respond, but yeah,
I just left you a message where I just basically got all gushy and emotional and a little weepy and was like, I love our podcast so much. I'm like really grateful and delighted and proud of us. And like at least once every 3 months, we send a message like that to each other, meaning like it just feels like a real honor to be in conversation with our guests and each other and the audience. And so it just feels like, yeah, more of this. We spoke a couple episodes ago about social media, and social media often feeling like kind of disconnected and echo chamber like. And for me, this just always feels like a place of like intimacy and connection, which is a big part of why I feel like, yeah, more. Let's have this just be available to more people because it's super magical. And then we get to do cool things like go on a fucking road show. I mean,
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, can you tell I have big ideas?
Yeah.
So the question, is like, okay, well, we could have a conversation about what's the strategy and what are the steps and what are the action items to grow the podcast. And we will, I think, talk about some of those. But and also there's another question, which is like, what's the balance of like how much is rooted in like the being rather than the doing, right?
Yeah.
Meaning like a core tenet of what I teach in all of my programs is like everything stems from your beliefs and nothing else matters. So it would be pretty disingenuous of me to be like, oh, let's just like go hammer out a podcast growth strategy, right? Without like really looking at like, well, what are we believing is possible, and like what is our relationship to being in the podcast, if that all makes sense. And so that's like and I don't have a fully formed answer to any of that, but it feels like the question that I want to. There's like 7 questions in there.
Yeah. All right. So this is where I get into like business meeting mindset mode. So, okay. So this is where I think, just to, as a refresher for us, Kyley, you and me, this is how I've seen it kind of go down. We've had these meetings before about like, okay, what do we need to do? The meeting about like what's the strategy? And before, I don't know, we had this idea of like, let's do like the what's the deal with series. And then we had this idea of like, oh, let's do series. We'll do a series around Earth and motherhood. And like, that was very much like a strategy. Those were like fun ideas, but I think our mindset then was very much like, hey,
this will create continuity and like be its own kind of thing to promote and bring listeners in a new kind of way. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's what I've noticed is that like, and I think this is good for us to be like honest about what our strengths and weaknesses are, is like, we didn't execute those things. So I think what we struggle with is like, and is that we have, I think this is like an ongoing thing, is that we have all these ideas and then we have a really hard time like following through with execution. And that's me too, because I think I have this story about myself, like, oh, I'm a Capricorn. And so I am really good at like getting things done. But that is actually not true. Like I start things all the time and never finish. It's also because ideas are fun for me, right? So like you get so excited and you're like inspired. But I actually do think like, even with like, I think our capacity right now is like, we have this team that's amazing, that helps us. But like, in terms of, for me, I think that we're at our capacity in terms of like what we can be doing. And managing other people to do.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, so our I love what you're pointing out, which is like, we always have there's no shortage of ideas, right? Which is like, oh, we can like, there's no shortage of ideas. And including trying to hire someone to do all of this for us, which did not go well.
Oh my God,
we have an amazing team.
Yeah, we have an amazing team. We have an amazing team. But can I just share this? Because I think people don't know. So we actually did hire a producer, y'all, and spent a lot of time with the interviewing process, and it was like a whole thing. And she freaking totally ripped us off. Like it was insane.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, is that what you'd call it? I don't know if she scammed us, because I don't know if that was, but it was just a whole fucked up situation. It was
it was a lot of lip service, and then like literally like within 4 days we fired her. I mean, it was that bad. Yeah.
I mean, it was literally bananas. Like we paid her and then she just like didn't. Yeah, it was bananas. Anyway, so that's, we're kind of in a place. Well, this is kind of what I'm thinking though. I'm also thinking like, so we can't do you not necessarily do more and do strategy, but like, I'm okay with that because I'm like, what if we actually, what if our quote unquote strategy actually is to shift away from the doing and to focus on, I think what you're calling the being, which I'm also want to get more
We should
clarity
probably,
on.
yeah.
And like what
Be on
that
the same
means.
page about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm also like, what does that mean? Like to me, I'm like, are we talking like the energy behind something, you know, like, because this idea of that, like the energy behind something oftentimes dictates.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I use those words a lot because my mentor Will, that was his, like those were his words, being versus doing. And I actually have a post-it note on my
Oh no,
wall.
I totally get like the whole
yeah. Anyway, the question that he would always ask, like, who do you want to be right now, which is, I think, it's a good question. But I think there's like two ways to think about being. One is like, who am I being, like energetically, like in this moment, who am I being? Like, am I being the me who's reactionary or angry? Am I being the me who's compassionate? Like, who am I being as like the part of me that's at the front? But then I also think there's another layer to that question, which is like, if I can stand in the, how do I even put this into words? If my like beliefs and ideas and stories are supporting me, then it's easy for me to be the person who either executes on the ideas instead of just like letting them flitter away like a bunch of dandelion puffs, or like just is in the energy of their own creation so much that it just shows up without effort, right? And so there, being to me is a lot of like looking at, I guess, like the shadow work story stuff that I do a lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so there's kind of two layers of it. Anyway, go ahead, you were gonna say something.
Oh, I think I just wonder if you could walk me through some examples of like what you mean by that, like in that pertain to this podcast.
Yeah, well, so that's the part that feels less clear to me. Right? Because in business, maybe just because I spend a lot of time figuring it out, like I can feel when I'm like, oh, like, okay, I just launched a program, so I'm immediately having this sense of like this felt sense of like, oh, I hope people sign up. Do I feel like I can really observe the fluctuations of my energy, of like who I'm being in any given moment, of like, in this moment I'm being the person who's fucking scared. Oh, okay, now I'm being the person who's like, everything's gonna work out. Right? And then I can kind of choose which to sink into. But I think part of why I wanted to talk about this exact question with you is like, I don't have that same felt sense of the podcast, right? Like, it doesn't feel to me like I don't believe it could, it even that language, right? Is like, I don't like, could it be huge versus like, well, it already is. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I don't feel like I have in the podcast, I guess I don't know. That's part of why I think I wanted to bring this question, is like, what are our stories as it relates to the show and growing the show, and what maybe we think on some level, some deep level, might be required to grow the show. And therefore, because one of the big things that we do is like, if we think something is required and we don't want to do what is required, we will kind of like squat in the middle. So like, this will look like someone who's like, I don't want to have an Instagram account. I hate Instagram, but it's required to have a business. And so energetically, they're just like in this kind of like
stalemate.
Well, neither gets to exist, as opposed to like, because they're like, I'm not going to do the Instagram, but also I need it. And so you can, instead of being in that shitty middle place, you could just let go of the need for Instagram to have a business, and then space starts to show up. And so there might be stories that we have that we're unaware of what we think is required to grow the show, or like explode the show. And we don't know about them. So we don't realize that we've created a like middle space for us that we could just unhook from those stories. Like, oh, those things aren't required. We don't want to do them. And also they're not required. So we're just going to let go of the idea that they're required. And then we're like a balloon that's untethered and we get to float away.
Totally. Yeah. That completely makes sense. And I'm sure I have like a bunch of stories. And I think it's honestly because we haven't really like sat down and made space to like examine them together until now, which is why I'm really glad that we
in
that we did
part
this.
too, because it's just been effortless and fun, right? Like some of
Right.
the reason that I constantly examine money stories is because money is this like weird, complicated, stressful space, right? Like this podcast is just like largely fun and nourishing. So we haven't really needed to in the same way. So yeah.
Okay. So can we start? So my brain is like, sorry, like in 5 different directions. And I'm wondering if we can start from like macro, like top down, meaning like what exactly is our goal right now?
Yeah, I love that. Okay.
Yeah. And how concrete do we want to get with it, right? Because I could say like, I know my goal is like, let's just have like a shit ton of listeners and grow our audience. And that's really it. Like, that's what it is. Like, I just want to be able to get into the earbuds of more people and hang out with more people. Like,
I would like tens of thousands of listeners.
Tens of thousands. Okay. Yeah. I'm see, this is so, and this is, I think, a very different, this is like the manifesting thing where they talk about in human design. Like, I have a hard time manifesting in, or like thinking about goals in like concrete things. I'm just like, I just want like a lot of listeners, but I think
I mean, also though, like, so I'm famous in my husband laughs at me all the time. I literally will, like, I had this job once where I sold these databases that were like $40,000 a piece. And so when I would like have a big sale, it would be like, you know, a $400,000 sale or whatever. And I would regularly like just like fuck up the numbers. My husband would crack up at me. I'd be like, oh yeah, I made a $40,000 sale today. And then it would actually have been 400,000. And like, I just like,
yeah,
or I'd be like, anyways, the point being like, numbers aren't real.
Yeah.
And so like, I mean, if you take alchemy, I will actually try to convince you that money isn't real either. But like, and so in some ways saying 10,000 listeners is like, I'm just like plucking that out of thin air. And also like energetically, that's like, feels like, oh yeah, that's like a lot of listeners that like supports, that to me, it sounds like the size of a show where you get to like do a road tour and, you know, which these are my 2 wants really, do a road tour and interview Brene Brown.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's kind of arbitrary, but
that
also
is actually interesting to you. So you just mentioned like your top 2 goals. I actually do. I completely agree with those things, all of those things. I'm also noticing that I think a desire that I have that I'm realizing just now in this conversation is like, my desire is to have a team that's so tight and good and, you know, has all these different skill sets that we can do fun projects. Like I would like to do a series. I want to do a series. I want to do like a call-in, you know, like call-in stuff. I want to do fun, creative things with the podcast.
Oh, so basically like creating even more space for us to just be like the talent.
Yes. And you know, how I talked about, we struggle with the execution part because we're at like capacity or whatever, but like if we had a team of, you know, this is like down the line, and this would, I think, make more sense if we had, you know, tens of thousands of listeners, where we could do just fun, creative projects. And because right now we do like, you know, we have our conversations and then we have conversations with guests, which is, I think, really cool. But I think as we evolve, there's going to be room for more things. But I guess that's, as I'm saying this out loud, like, does that resonate with you? How do you?
1,000%. Okay. Yes. Cool. Like, yeah, I love that. And I think it makes me think of like, one of the things we've talked about before is like, I would love to interview some people who are spiritual, not specifically within the space of like our perspective of spirituality. Like, I would love to talk to like a rabbi and have like a really like deep dive conversation about spirituality, but also like, I have such little entry point into like non kind of mindfulness, mystical traditions that I don't even know where to begin. And again, bandwidth wise, don't have the capacity to do the kind of research to find someone who would be a good fit.
Yeah.
So that would, to me, that would also go in that bucket of like, you know, which also listeners send recommendations.
Yeah, totally. That's what I was thinking too. Yeah. But okay. So in terms of goals, and I don't know if the exact number of listeners that we like, you know, want to have is important, but I think, like, it's important to like the energy of like, when I say I want a lot of listeners, tens of thousands is a very different energy than it's like, 5,000 or whatever. So it's at least good for me to know like where you're at, and I'm with you.
You know what it is? I think I want enough I want enough listeners that there's a kind of like this is a funny word, but it's what's coming up, so I'll be honest. There's a kind of credibility. Not credibility of like, oh, other people, but like we can play at the table in a certain kind of way, right? When you have like a big show that has like a ton of downloads, you get to call up other big people, and you get to like, pull some strings in interesting different kind of ways. Like I don't know if you know Simone Grace Soul. She's a like marketing business coach.
You told me about her.
Oh, have I mentioned her? She's fucking great. She just made this beautiful post the other day that was like, she's been doing a lot about talking about everything in Ukraine, and she made this beautiful post that was like, yeah, I make a shitload of money, and so I get to show up in a big fucking way. Like meaning don't hide because the world's on fire. Like show up and then use your resources to make the world the way you want it to be. And so that's always really appealing to me, right? It's like, yeah, like
you mean like a bigger impact.
Yeah. So
yeah. And I hear you.
I'm here for clout.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah,
also, I feel like we'd write a really good book. I feel like our Netflix series is awesome. I mean, there's really an infinite.
I love it. I love your big dreaming imagination. Yeah, to me, I'm just like, I don't know what I want. I just want, honestly, I think my goals are a lot more modest, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like, I'm really like, all those things are great, and I want them. I'm on board, but like, I would be so happy. Like, it would be a huge fucking deal if I could just be like, I don't have to worry where clients come from ever again, because there's just enough, like, the reach of this
numbers,
podcast is just enough. Like, that in itself is huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And I'm like, that's a modest goal, but I mean, is that a modest goal?
I don't think that's a modest goal at all. I mean, that felt sense when I was just talking about this with a client an hour ago. Like, that felt sense of like, I am fully, wholly safe in terms of like being taken care of. My needs are going to be met. Full stop. I don't have to ask any questions about that. I mean, in some ways, I think that's what we're like literally all trying to create for ourselves.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think that's the question why entrepreneurship is like can be so intense, is because it's basically like you're constantly facing the question of like, what is my relationship to my needs being met? So yeah, I don't think that that's modest. And I also sometimes talk about like this idea of budget versus goal. Have I talked to you about that before?
No.
So it's just like something that I teach in terms of like, if you are interested in setting a goal, like if you're going to do a launch, or like if you're someone who is inspired by setting like money goals, that it can be really helpful to have like a budget and a goal. The budget being like, this is my break even, right? Like all of my expenses are covered. Like I will be comfortable if, this is a $10,000 launch. And my goal, my real desire is for it to be a $30,000 launch. Yeah. Just picking random numbers. Right. And so what's helpful there is that you get to speak to like the really like big picture vision. And also you get to acknowledge like, and this is where this is where I need to be. Like, this is the floor. And then this is like the big picture vision. So to me, what I'm hearing you say is like, our budget is like for the show to have the kind of size that and reach that client acquisition, to use a like clinical term, is just like a matter of course. Like, you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to think about it. And then maybe our goal is the road show with Brene Brown.
Right. Yeah, I love it. That makes complete sense.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we get there?
Yeah, exactly. And it is interesting, like, I think Yeah. I think a year ago when maybe we had a meeting like this, it would have been definitely like much more strategic.
Mm.
And
That's what I was thinking about today. Yeah.
what do you mean? Like a year ago?
Sorry, I'm cutting you off. Go ahead. You talk.
Well, no, that was just, yeah. And I just think that now I think I've changed and I think my approach to business has changed. And that, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm working this out myself, but this idea of it's not, I don't know. Yeah, it's not about what I do so much necessarily, but I think my energy behind it, my consciousness, my energy, my beingness, and my beliefs. Like those are all kind of words that I think can be used interchangeably.
Yeah.
Like for, but okay. And so I think maybe this is a good segue into like one of our doubts, because a constant doubt that I have, not just with the podcast, but in life in general, is like, that's what my heart believes. And then I always forget. And then I'm like, wait, is that literally, I literally, no joke, Kyley will tell you that like probably on a pretty regular basis, once a month, depending on how like lit up I'm feeling. But I will ask myself, like, am I crazy? Like,
Yeah.
am I a crazy woo-woo Al-Anon, like, no, I mean, QAnon person? Like, this idea of like, is this real? Like, am I detached from reality that things can work this way? And then of course I come back in and I'm like, so connected
what
to
the
this.
fuck is reality?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or I just feel so connected to truth that I'm like, of course it's this way. It's nothing, like this is everything. And then I come back and I'm like, okay, am I deluding myself? So like that's one perfect example of just like ground floor already. What am I not believing? And let me tell you, Kyley, I can list you 50 fucking things off the top of my head right now, probably, of things that like where I have doubts.
Yeah.
Which then end up manifesting, right? In like how things work.
It's so interesting because I literally, so timeline wise, I just did a big workshop for the relaunch of Heal Your Business Story, which is a program I've done a couple times and I've just revised, and beautiful workshop. And then of course, like anytime you do a big thing, there's like the celebration and there's also the doubt. And what I was sitting in the story and watching what was unfolding in my body. And what I realized, I was like, well, where is the doubt coming from? And, the doubt being like, well, is it going to work? Right. Is essentially the question we're always asking. And when I looked at that question, instantly what I saw was, oh, I don't know if it's safe to trust myself. Right. Because at this point, enough of me is like, yeah, I did the thing. I'm in the energy. I believe in this so fully. I've done all the money work. Like I'm in the space, like whatever, like check all the boxes energetically, belief system wise, all systems are go. And the only thing in the way is the me being like, but can you trust yourself? And that is so interesting, right? Because it's like, arguably the only thing in the way is the not trusting yourself. And also it doesn't actually feel safe to trust yourself. And that's just a weird fucking dance. So anyway, I just love what you're saying about like the doubt, which is like, I just love what you're saying because I completely
but what
resonate.
was your conclusion from that? Like,
oh, well, then I just did the thing that I do, which is like, oh, that's interesting. Right? Like, because I increasingly am less interested in like fixing, because I think fixing makes wrong. But instead I just was like, oh, okay, the story under the story here is it safe to doubt, to trust myself? That's interesting. And then I just sat with that longer. And what came up, the next like wave of emotions that came up was disgust, that I was just like so fucking over myself and my self-doubt that the emotion, which really surprised me, because I know that's not one that shows up very often, was actual disgust. And so again, I was like, oh, I literally said like, I was processing this with a friend and I was literally said like, oh, hi pal, like that's interesting. And then I went to bed and I woke up and I felt really different. I mean, if I'm totally honest, right? Like there's other times in my life where I've like seen something like that. And then I do like an inner journey, or I like put the situation in a friend's hands. But in this moment, it was like, it felt like witnessing that under the doubt is actually a fear that it's not safe to trust myself, was all the observation that needed to happen, because then it already started to shift. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I think that is actually what happens oftentimes. It's just bringing something up from the unconscious to the conscious level sometimes is enough, I think, to shift everything,
Yeah.
to shift that thing in that moment.
And then like the thing that then today, I just kind of kept intentionally bringing my energy back to like, what if it is safe to trust yourself? So I'm a big fan of the what if question. So instead of like this binary game of like, it's not safe to trust yourself. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I like to try to play the game of like, well, what if it was? Because then I can soften. And so anytime today I noticed the like, it's not safe to trust yourself show up, I just was like, okay, well, what if it was?
That's so funny. Yeah. The question that I often ask my clients is like, what would you do if you did feel safe? If you remembered if you were safe?
Yes.
Because safety is like such a huge piece of all of this.
Yeah. That's exactly that same energy of the question.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, I think 3 people signed up today, so it's working. Not that it has to like have immediate payoff. You know, that's not required. Anyway, we got off on a tangent about doubt.
Right. So
and the doubt of like, is it okay for it to really be just about beliefs?
Yeah, just about like energy. I don't know. It's so weird. I mean, yeah, no, this is like a bigger conversation, I feel like, because yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if I'm just doing a inventory right now if I think beliefs and energy feel like the same thing to me. But I do think that our beliefs create our energy. Would you?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because belief is kind of like the story and energy is the felt experience. So they're kind of one in this. They're kind of
like, or I think they're all, I think, yeah, I don't know. I almost see it like a graph. Like I feel like our beliefs, I might, for me anyway, I feel like for me, it starts with like a belief, like this is the thing at the top, and then it leads down into what my felt experience is, which then creates like the energy in which how I be, like, how am I showing up to something?
Yeah. And also reverse engineering it. I think the way that I uncover what I'm believing is often based on what energy I'm experiencing.
Yeah. Yes, totally. Yep.
Right. Like, so I'm like, oh, I feel all like icky and stressed out. Okay. Like rewind. What's the story that's creating that? I also want to say something that just occurred to me about like numbers and belief. The reason I didn't say 100,000 listeners per week is because that actually doesn't feel accessible to me. Right. Like if I were to like wave a magic wand, I'd be like, we got a fucking million listeners a week. Right. But I like, I don't, I can feel in my body that I don't believe 100,000 listeners tomorrow could listen to our show. Like in the same way that like, I don't believe that my business makes $100,000 in a day tomorrow. Right. Like I might want that, but I don't hold that to be possible. But the 10,000 or the tens of thousands listeners like feels like reasonable. That seems like achievable. And so it is a belief that I can like hold in my system. Yeah. And then eventually we can like create the next goal. Anyway.
Well, what's really interesting to me when you saying that is, I don't know if I want, like, I don't know if I want, like the reason, I mean, I don't know if I want 1 million listeners.
Yeah.
Like, I just, like, I
don't know if I give a shit about that.
Yeah, well, no, more so though, that's like, I don't know, a million listeners scares the fuck out of me. Like, I don't want 1 million people listening to me. That's how I feel. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like I can feel, maybe that's like a weird shrinking thing, or like a not, don't wanting to be seen thing. But like, I like anonymity.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I mean, I think that's useful data, right? Of like, okay, so we want to be big, but not so big that we get recognized regularly in the grocery store. I don't know if that happens to podcasts.
I don't know if that happens to podcasts, but I mean, I just think it's a good thing to maybe discuss right now, because I'm like, and who knows, maybe in 5 years, like whatever, or if when not even 5, let's just we say we meet our goal in a year or whatever. maybe we would have to like reassess. But that is just actually an interesting thing that maybe we should get on the same page about, is also like, well, how big do we want to be? Because like, yeah,
Yeah.
that
I'm
sounds
on
like
board
my
with not a
nightmare.
million.
That sounds like my
Yeah.
nightmare getting recognized. Like, just so you know, like there's I don't know, there's a privacy and like that I appreciate about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're also, I think, a very private person.
Yeah, in some respects, yeah.
Like, yeah.
In
yeah.
some ways, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I know
Like
it's a funny thing to
I have
say
like a weird
because
boundary. I have a weird thing. Like, I'll come on here and tell most people, you know, I'm very open here, but I'm also like, I don't know, I can't explain it. There's a
I
line
can't
that I
explain
think,
it either, but I know because
yeah, there's a line that I don't want to be crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't feel like a shrinking thing. That feels like a authenticity thing,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
is like, okay, yeah, we want a show that like has this really big reach, and also like that, like that space of you get anonymity and being just Eva in the world is of great value. That is important to
yeah.
I'm on board with that.
Okay, cool. Thank you for holding that space for me.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to get into doubts, because to me, this is fun.
Can I just say how much fun I'm having in this conversation?
Okay, good. Good.
Okay, good.
I like uncovering doubts. I like the excavation process. And so I want to be clear to you that this isn't, and this is like something that happens with my clients all the time. My clients will be like, yeah, but I don't actually really believe that it's just kind of hanging out there. I'm like, even if it's hanging out, this isn't about like, oh, do you actually fully believe this? Like, we need to just do an airing, like air it all out of like, just because if it's even occupying 1% of your consciousness, it's worth acknowledging.
Yeah. Because we are not one monolithic, we're made up of many parts, right? So some part of you is believing the doubt, even as another part of you isn't. Mm-hmm. And so to ignore the doubt is to actually reject part of you. So we can't be whole if we're busy rejecting ourselves. And so the doubt,
it's like
there's a lot of hair going in my face, guys. I'm like really getting animated and dramatic, and also like pulling hair out of my mouth. We are so ready for prime time. Yeah. So yeah, you can't be whole and reject parts of yourself. And so like the doubt is beautiful.
Totally.
Yeah, I think this is actually one of our like really big shared loves is like welcome the doubt, because it has some wisdom, or at the very least exists. So rejecting it is a waste of your energy,
time. It's just not helpful. But it's also because like, I'm like, oh, to me, the reason it's fun is because I'm like, oh, I see, like the more I can excavate, the more free I will become. Like, to me, it's like, this is such a self-love thing where I'm actually doing like, it's almost like if we want to talk about up leveling, it's like the more you can pinpoint, I think the more you become available for clearing all that shit out.
Yes. And it's funny, the way I see it exactly the same way. The mental image is like, I think of us as all made up of all these many parts. And that when we meet the part of ourselves who has doubt or fear or whatever, and we witness them and integrate them, we're no longer separate from that part of ourselves. And that to me is like the journey of wholeness, is like, oh, I scooped up that part. Now it's inside me. I scooped up that part. And so we just become increasingly whole, which is just another word for what you would call liberation, right? It's just, it's the same. It's just, that's the mental image I have for it.
All right. So I'm just going to do laundry list, and then I'll start. You can, and then maybe you can go, or maybe you can chime in. But like, first thing is, there's too many fucking podcasts out there. Like, that's a thought that I have all the time. And to be honest, like, that isn't even mine. Like, it's so interesting how we pick up things, but like, it literally is like from, okay, I'm trying to think how much I want to share without getting lost. I just think that sometimes energetically, or if I even mentally, someone will just like drop something in that's not even, and it's like, it's not even yours, but then like, or someone, like, I'll see something online and I didn't have the belief at all. And then suddenly it's in my consciousness. And then I'm like, and then it creates this like frozen belief picture thing. So I think there's memes out there of like, you know, everyone and their friend out there has a podcast or whatever like that. So my idea is like, this is one of the bigger ones, is that like there's so much fucking, and we've talked about this actually was it last week? Like there's a lot of noise out there, there's a lot of fucking content. And last time we talked about it, it was more of like a who do you think you are thing, but now this is more of just like it is a limiting belief of like, oh, there's too
much competition, too much noise.
There's too much noise, and I think people are inundated with shit and they almost like don't want podcasts. I actually like feel that way pretty often. Like, oh, I'm like, oh, people don't want or need more information. They need less information.
So you know what, I love doing this because my immediate felt response is like, yeah, but ours is fucking good. Like,
but there's a lot of good stuff out there. And also
I'm just amused. Like my immediate reaction is like, yeah, but ours is fucking good. So ours is worth listening to.
Right.
And which is not how I feel about everything all the time. But like, I just feel so strongly like, but there's a bunch of shit and ours is fucking gold. Like it is, I'm not even gonna lie. There's a little bit of like, yeah, this doesn't even feel like the most like generous response on my part, but my honest felt response.
No,
like,
I get it when you're like so pumped up about something. And I think that energy is good to have. But I do think it's really interesting because this is so interesting to me because like this work is, I think we both know how to do this work for ourselves. Like, and this is an experience of like, oh, we have to like look at each other's beliefs now because my belief could be influencing this podcast and you have this totally different belief. And I will say, I probably have a lot of, you might even be surprised as to like how many limiting beliefs I have about just creation as a whole, right? So like that may be influencing how this podcast works, and then that's influencing you. Right. So and even this idea of like, oh,
this is so fucking great. Yeah. Okay, I'm so amped.
Like this, even the belief of like our shit is good. I'm even like, but is it really better than like everyone else's? Like everyone thinks their shit's good. Everyone thinks that their own farts smells good, which is not true, but that's just like a weird saying that I think, is that an Asian saying? I don't know. But this idea of like, everyone thinks it's like their own shit smells fine. Like, I don't know. I really have this belief of like,
so this is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead. You get that general idea.
It's interesting because I do not carry this kind of like wholehearted confidence about myself and my like solo work. Like I have a great amount of confidence in it, and also I am way more likely to have, I mean, I was just saying a minute ago, like doubt showing up. But in this partnership, I have like, and I feel actually there's two places that I feel this way. One is here, and one is the work that I do with Liz, future podcast guest Liz Simpson. And I like, my faith in us is unshakable in a way that's really different than my faith in me. And is not always true of all partnerships. Like it's a very specific thing here. And so yeah, I am just like, yeah, ours is great. I can't even explain it. I'm just like, no, but we're the actual
and I love that, by the way, because I think that's really helpful for me actually as someone who is a natural doubter. But I think the bigger question is like, well, okay, what do you do with this though?
Yeah, right.
But actually, before we get there, can I just do the laundry list?
Oh yeah. Sorry, okay. I'm totally interrupting you.
So it's like there's too much content out there. You know, it's not, I'm not doubting actually that our stuff is good, but I don't know if I feel the same, like, oh, but our stuff is like
the best,
like better than everyone else, because the truth is, and I think this has something to do with my weird, like universalism. I think everyone creates good shit. Like that's kind of, I think, closer to, well, is that true? But I do think so. I think I have a lot of respect for anyone who creates anything. I think a lot of people create like good shit. Like when people are out there like hating on other people on like, I'm on Instagram and I'm like, oh, everyone is creating like really cool shit. Whereas I feel like a lot of times people are like, oh, people are creating shit. Anyway, so yes. Okay, other doubts.
I feel like I need a notebook, so I stop interrupting you.
Yeah, that's why I grabbed my notebook. You want to go grab one?
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna grab.
Actually, can we go pause? I'm gonna pee.
Perfect.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Hey. Jen.
Okay. Oh, Jennifer, we're back.
Yeah. Okay, what did I leave off?
You were saying doubt about there's too much noise, you know. everyone's making good stuff.
Right. Or are we actually like necessarily better?
Right.
Okay, more laundry list stuff. Okay, this goes along with that. It's not just that there's not too many, there's a lot of podcasts out there, but there are a lot of spiritual podcasts out there. And I hate to like, so actually I still remember one time when we started, this was like pretty early on, and you were like, you know what, I really like just think we're doing something great. And I was like totally with you. I was like, yes, we're doing something great. And you're like, I don't actually think there's a lot of people out there doing what we're doing. And I didn't, at the time, I don't know, I think I was just in a space of like feeling good, but at the time I actually did have the thought, but I didn't feel like needing to argue at the point. But like, I think there are a lot of spiritual podcasts out there. Actually, I know there are a lot of spiritual podcasts out there, and they're kind of doing what we're doing. So
I don't know that I don't know that I'm trying to not interrupt you. I still don't actually know that they're doing what we're doing.
Maybe we can have a bigger conversation about what it is that we're doing, but
yes. So yeah, keep giving your list, because I'm trying not to, I have thoughts. So
okay, yeah,
I'm writing things down.
Okay, cool. And honestly, I think that's like the majority of it. I think maybe lesser so like the more minor things are this idea of like, oh, like there's still sometimes that lingering belief of like, even though my logical brain goes like, that's not true, but my illogical brain says, it's the irony is that my illogical brain is one that's saying, oh, we need to do logical things. Like, oh, we need to like do a blog. We should do a blog post. We should do guest promotions. We should do like, you know, whatever else the things that people do to grow podcasts. We should market more. We should do more giveaways, which by the way, I'm not opposed to these things. I'm not saying like those things are bad, because if your consciousness is like, if your belief around like why you are doing those things is coming from a place of like love and alignment, then those are things are good. But I'm coming at it from a place of like, oh, I have to do those things. Like if we don't do these things, how are we actually going to grow our podcast? Right. And what other beliefs? Why do I, the question I'm asking myself is, what beliefs do I like? Why do I think we wouldn't hit tens of thousands of listeners? And why wouldn't we? Yeah, just the honesty that we don't have the time maybe to put into what it might require. Not even that it's like a lot of hard work. It's like, even if it wasn't a lot of hard work, like, do we have the time?
Right.
And the time and the commitment. That's all I have for now. I'm sure there are other things that might be kicked up later, but I'm curious, before we address these, how about, do you want to share your laundry list? Like, if you ask yourself, like, why wouldn't we hit 10,000, tens of thousands? Like,
so I think that there's two that seem really loud. There might be others as we keep talking, but the biggest one I think you kind of just alluded to, which is like, it's too much work. That whatever is like, it's too much. It's just too hard to like do all the efforting that would be required. And also a felt sense of like, I don't fucking get the recipe. Right?
Yes.
Like your point about do we have the time and commitment? I instantly was like, if I was guaranteed, like, follow these exact steps, which is ironic because anyone who reads my sales copy, I shit on exact steps all the time. Right. But if someone gave us the exact steps, then I would fucking do it. Right. I would for this, I would carve out all the time in the world if I knew for sure it was going to like create the tens of thousands of listeners. And I think one of the reasons, this is actually like clarifying for me now, one of the reasons that I lose interest in the ideas that we have of like, oh, we'll do this, oh, we'll do that, is because I'm like, I don't fucking know if this is going to be the one that works.
Dude, I think you're speaking to every business like entrepreneur out there. Like, this is such a thing. It's like I don't know actually how to do it. And if you don't have belief and understanding around how it works, then you just feel like you're a little bit shit out of luck, or you're kind of screwed a little bit. So this is like, it's just, I think you're giving voice to something really important, which is how so many people feel. Is like, I just want to, this is why steps are so compelling.
Right.
And you know more than anyone else that like, actually that's a really dangerous avenue to go down, because one person's steps is not going to be the other person's steps. So, but yes, I feel you completely. It's like, we don't know how, like how does actually someone like grow a podcast?
And what's also interesting is we've even like researched, like we've looked into like let's buy a course, right? Of like, how do you grow a podcast? And there's a ton of amazing courses out there of how to start a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but we have yet to find like a resource. And even our attempt to hire someone, which didn't go well, was like, I mean, again, our actual team, fucking amazing. We love you guys. But we were seeking to hire someone with the intention of helping us really grow the show. Like we have like, it's interesting because the how eludes me, even as there's another part of me that wants to be like, there is no how, that's just made up, but we're going to pretend for a moment that we need a how. The steps seem confusing to me. And even the place where we might find the steps is also eluding me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I would invest in a program that was like, well, here's some proven strategies, but even like our Googling is like, well, try this and try that. And, you know, and so it is
a mystery.
It feels like a mystery.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a really good word.
And
so that creates for me, just say one word, that creates for me a sense of like, it's just a fucking shot in the dark. It's just pure luck. And I think then going back to the thing I was saying earlier about like trusting is it safe to trust myself? I'm like, I don't know if I don't know if I hold the cards for the shot in the dark to work.
That's, I don't know why, but I feel like you just said something helpful, because this idea of like, I don't know, it's a mystery resonates with me, but I've never linked it to the fact that like, oh, I'm not trusting myself. And I do think that that's true. Like, I don't trust that I hold the cards to like make this work. That's like really helpful for me to hear. I will say, so I hear what you're saying. Like the how in itself is like, there's no one out there even offering steps possibly. And who knows, like maybe there is, and we just haven't come across it. But I do think that like, even when we have done the research to be like, these are the steps, or our fake producer that we hired, she actually did offer some things. She was like, you can be doing a blog, getting on other podcasts, doing cross promotion, like commercials, like, she actually listed some practical, like actual really good things. Yeah. But even then though, like for me, I'm like, but does that even work? That's actually, because I'm like, I don't do YouTube, but Adam does YouTube. So I think he runs across the same issue. It's the idea of like, these strategies are all very long game strategies. Like, I think they could work, but they might be like something that and then people are always talking about like, you just have to be consistent. And it's like, that could work. And over 5 years, then you could get that following. And I'm like, is that how it's supposed to work?
What's interesting, what I'm realizing as you're saying this, is that the question of does that even work? I feel like I'm willing to play the game of like, well, let's give it a shot, but I don't want to do it. Going back to the time question,
totally.
It's like, I'm willing, I can feel myself being like, okay, I can go into the space of like, let's just pick a strategy and run with it. And that's our strategy. And I'm willing to trust that. But I don't actually want to sacrifice my time.
Totally. Completely understandable, because what you're saying is it's a little bit of a gamble. And so the gamble is worth it if someone else can do it
someone
for
else's
us.
time.
Yeah, because then it would be worth it. It literally would be worth it. Like that actually, from a like personal boundaries standpoint, makes sense, because it's like you have a limited amount of time. And so it's not worth it to you to use your own time to do that, because you don't know if there's going to be a payoff. But if someone else did it for you, it would be,
if someone else did it for me, or if I knew for sure there was a payoff.
Right. Exactly.
Which is interesting, because arguably there's for sure a payoff, as long as I believe for sure there's a payoff.
Oh God. And this is where I'm getting like real in the weeds, but I'm like, but also that goes back to the belief thing, where I go like, but is that even true? Like, is that even true? You're saying as long as there's belief, there's payoff. And then I'm over here like, but I don't even know if that's true.
Okay. So should we go there? Where do we go next? They're like, the snake is eating its tail like 1,000 times over here.
Yeah. Where do we go next?
Should we go back to this question of like our show being quote unquote better, and this statement I made about not a lot of people are doing what we're doing?
Yeah. Okay. That seems juicy.
Okay. I don't know that I would say that our show is, I don't know that better is the word that I would use, because I do really agree with your point that like, creation is in and of itself like fucking epic, right? And like and not always easeful and requires a lot of like willingness to be vulnerable. And so yeah, man in the arena style, like anyone who's creating anything is therefore like it is valuable. And I do think that what we create here feels really different. And admittedly, I'm not listening to like tons and tons of other spiritual podcasts. So perhaps I just haven't found other shows that are doing exactly what I think we do so well. But I think that there's a real intimacy that we create. And in that, there's a vulnerability. Like we're very real, you know, like even like this is a business meeting that we're posting on the show, which is also to say like, because there isn't actually a difference for the most part between like, you know, when we're recording and when we're not. And I think we go into the weeds willingly and often. I think that there's a lot of this kind of goes back to what we were talking about when we talked about social media the other day, that there's a lot of like kind of superficial content and superficial approaches to spirituality. And I'm not upset that that exists, because that was also my entry point, right? So I don't think that that's bad for existing, even as like I am hungry for more substantial, meatier conversations that go to the like shadowy places or the vulnerable places or the like confused, I don't really have an answer places. And I feel like that's what we always do. Like that's like home base for us, is to go to like to grapple with things that are confusing. And to me, this is really your expertise, coming back from the depths of what might be confusing or murky or shadowy, and then making it feel accessible in our real lives and like practical, and something that's like, okay, I went somewhere scary because it was overwhelming or confusing concept or whatever, and like now I'm walking away with like a tool or a grounded understanding of something. And I don't know, I don't think there's a lot of other places where that special combination exists. And we're really good at not taking ourselves fucking seriously at all. Because I think that's the other thing. I think there are some really beautiful, like deep, honest conversation. Like On Being is a really gorgeous podcast, and I love her. And also, it is very serious, you know. And so I really feel like I have to be in the mood for like something that is serious. And I feel like we do something that's really like deep and serious at the same time that it's like silly and light and irreverent. And that's one of my other favorite things about us.
Okay, lots of thoughts that I'm processing. First of all, I just want to say this is where I think community is like really important. I don't know. This is where I just really appreciate community. I appreciate you, but community, because I've just noticed in creating something with you, like when I'm by myself, I could go down the rabbit hole, like the dark hole or whatever, the black hole of like negativity, but uh like something that Adam will say to me that's like so loving is like whenever I have a lot of doubt about something, he'll be like, you can borrow some of my belief
Oh,
about
I
something.
love that.
Yeah, and it's been just really sweet. And I feel like that's a little bit of this too. It's like it's so helpful to have a partner, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
help you offer perspective. And as you were saying that, a couple things came up for me. I think there were actually this is what I do know. I know there are a lot of podcasts out there where like two best friends are coming out and talking about spirituality. And the reason I know that is because for a while we had Catherine, one of our assistants, and also, just like research podcasts that we could then go on. And as I was just doing some preliminary stuff, I was like, wow, there's a lot of podcasts out there doing this. And the funny thing is I never listened to any of them, but I just immediately made that I made it, the meaning I gave it was like, oh, we're not special. Like, and it's just funny how I immediately went to not just that we're not special, but like, we're we're doing something that a bunch of other people are doing. So, but I don't actually know that that's true. And because I've never listened to any of them, and then where that thought took me was like, okay, well, first, that's important to acknowledge already, is that like, that's kind of a scarcity thought that's based on nothing. And then I was like, I don't know why this was helpful for me, but all of those things I think you're saying are true about our podcast. And I think what came up for me is like, that is enough, because I think where my brain was like, I don't think we need to be better than other podcasts in order to be successful. I think we just need to be ourselves.
Yes.
Essentially is kind of like what processed for me as I was hearing you say those things. It's like, if I continuously believe that we have to be better to like be successful,
awful.
Right. That's like so much pressure, and also a very egoic story and kind of silly.
Yeah.
And we don't need to be better. We just need to be whatever you just said, which we already are, which is the shit. Like that already is the shit. Like if we can just be doing that, that's a party that I want to go to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah, 1000% agree.
Yeah. That's really,
and it's interesting how much like better, because when we first started this conversation, I had this sense of like, but we are better. And I'm watching myself soften to this same place of like, so what I think is interesting is like, you had a story that was like, I don't know if we're better. And I had a story that is actually just as not helpful, which is like, yeah, we're fucking better. Right. Which is like both actually an attachment to like, there's a ranking and we fall somewhere on it. And I think what I'm observing soften for me is like the actual exact same realization, which is like, it's irrelevant. Like better doesn't even, what the fuck did that even mean? Right.
Yeah.
And we are really excellent at being ourselves. And we've created a space where it's safe for us to consistently show up as ourselves, which I think also creates space for our guests to show up as themselves, which is, that feels to me like one of the best honors when our guests come and like have a great fucking time and feel like soft and received.
Okay.
So yeah.
Can I say something? Because I'm getting like all emotional now, because I think this is like it, like this is this owning of like, we just do what we're doing, which is like just being ourselves and having a good time, and is very much circling back to, I think, the original belief of like, can I believe that this is enough? Can I believe that we are enough? And can I bet on us? It's a betting, which is coming back to, can I trust myself? Can I trust us? Can I trust that this, just two people being incredibly earnest and genuine and in love of the creation process, is that enough? And the truth is, that's a fucking gamble. And but that's a gamble that I'm willing to take. And I think that is what this is like. This is like all about, which comes back to the belief thing of like, sometimes like that is the challenge. That is my growth edge of like, can I believe and bet on us that that's enough? And sometimes that's going to be the reason it's a growth edge, is because obviously sometimes fear is going to come in and say, no, you can't. And my job is to come back to my heart again and again and again and say, fuck yeah. Like I'm willing to take that bet.
It's interesting because what I'm observing, it's like showing up for me, is like, I feel so fully like, of course that's enough for us to continue making an awesome podcast that like creates meaning and like joy in our lives and the lives of our listeners. And I have this really deep sense of like, I don't fucking know if it's enough to get what I want. That's right. It's not actually, is being me enough to be awesome? That like that feels like, sure, solid. Like being me is enough, like to exist in the world and create meaningful existence. Yes. Is it enough to get what I want?
Is it enough to get in this situation, tens of thousands, like specifically
in this situation, that being tens of thousands of listeners. And the answer is, fuck, I'm scared.
Right. Okay. So
which is also to say, it's not fucking about the 10,000 listeners, right? Like this is also, I feel like, giving everyone like a front row seat into like what it means to be coached by either one. Okay, you were gonna say something.
Okay, so I completely hear you, and now I feel like I'm the one carrying like we're passing the baton back and forth here, and I feel like okay, so your question of like, is this enough? Is us just believing in this and doing what we love enough to actually get us our particular outcome, which is like whatever, tens of thousands of listeners. And I think the challenge here is if we, okay, I feel like I had it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know if this is too idealistic, but I feel like the opportunity here is, or it's almost like God, the universe, source being like, if you believe that it is enough, it will be enough.
Yeah.
And the challenge is, if it doesn't happen, will you still believe that you're enough? Like as that it doesn't necessarily, like, so let's just say we don't get tens of thousands of listeners. Like, I think
what faith is some faith broken in that moment?
Yeah. Or I think the scary thing that a lot of people do is like, okay, well, it didn't work. It must mean that I'm
doing something wrong. I'm not enough. It's
that. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I've had that conversation with clients, so I know exactly what you're talking about. The like, well, it's not working. Like, it hasn't worked yet, so I must be doing something wrong. And my response to those clients is always like, I mean, varying on the moment, but it's always like, what if you weren't? What if it didn't mean any? What if it wasn't about you doing something? Like, it doesn't. That goes back to the idea that our doing is more important than our being, right? Anyway, I feel like I'm losing this also. I also feel a little like I'm losing the thread, like maybe because I think this idea, this question actually feels so huge. I can almost feel myself like squirming away from it, because in some ways it's actually the question that's at the heart of actually everything I think. This is actually the question that my clients come to me with. This is actually the question that, like, I do this work because it's the question I am asking myself every fucking day, which is like, is being myself enough to get what I want? And I'm actually kind of reveling in how fucking uncomfortable this question is making me.
Well, where I am is I actually feel like I had this sort of like huge vision for a second, and it just like, and it came and like collapsed. But I mean, okay, so I think, okay, let me just try something out here.
Yeah.
Because I think the reason this is confusing is because it is a paradox. You know how you and I are always talking about paradox? It's like the paradox in it is it's not, I actually do believe it's the belief. Like the belief is the thing that ultimately dictates the outcome. Like if you, like, essentially we get to decide. Your question is, are we, is this Hello Universe enough to get us the outcome that we want? And it's almost like I feel like a voice is coming down and saying like, well, you get to decide.
Do you want it?
Yeah. You decide. You decide if you think it's enough. Like there's nothing else that decides that. It's literally not the strategy. And if you're on other podcasts and how much time you put in, it's like, you know, this is you. This is what you're always talking about, Kyley. It's like it's the intention. I set the intention and
therefore it already exists.
Yeah. Like you can create your reality.
Yeah. And we are creating our reality. So it's like we can create our reality with intention, or we can create it with like quote unquote passivity, but like it's all us creating it. Right. So this is just us deciding that our podcast has tens of thousands of listeners now. as opposed to before we were acting like it was someone else's decision.
Mm-hmm.
But
Exactly.
it's always actually been our decision.
Yes, but and what's happening is that like what I'm noticing is that like we hadn't made that decision before.
Yeah.
Like we at all, like at all, because of all the things that we just talked about, because of this weird loop-de-loop conversation that we just had. And I think what we are bringing to the table right now, just you and me, it's like, wait, are we going to dare to make that decision? Because the reason I use word dare is because it's really vulnerable.
Because okay, so this is now it's like connecting to what you were saying before of like, because it is a vulnerable thing to dare, because there's always the specter of like, well, what happens if it doesn't work out?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what happens if I trust myself and I'm made a fool of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
and I think and this is why I think creation of any kind, art, childbearing, like anything that you're creating is like, there's no fucking guarantee. I don't know that like you're gonna get exactly what you want, but all you can really do is trust and love and like put one foot in front of the other with that belief.
and oh, this is interesting because I'm also having this like things are like slipping in it as we're talking about this. It is one of the things that I think one of the pieces that we brought here in this conversation is clarifying of our stories, and also clarifying of what our actual desire is, right? Because I think, the thing about intention is it's like a laser beam, right? It's a focusing of our energy. So like, I'll always remember this moment when a client was like, in one of my programs, she was like, oh my God, I just realized like I keep saying I want more money, but I haven't picked how much, which doesn't mean you have to like to the dollar amount. But she was like, I literally have just been saying I want more,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't thought in terms of like, do I want more that's hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars? Like, what does more even mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, do I want more that like replaces a salary, right? Like, because it doesn't even, you can think of more outside of like a specific number, but like emotionally, like what does it mean anyway? And so I think when we had our conversation about like, what is our actual desire here, what is our goal, that was the important starting point, because we solidified like, what does it mean, what does more mean for us, what's our vision for more? And that kind of, I think, like focused our energy. And then we got to be like, okay, well, what's the shit that's standing between the more and us in this moment? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so sorry, wait. Okay, so can I go back to the vulnerable piece though?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm wondering is like, how do you feel about that? This idea of like, okay, so like we decide that like tens of thousands of
Mm-hmm.
listeners is what we want, that we want to move forward with the belief that like this can just be
Mm-hmm.
enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I mean, I guess my question is like, do you ever run across this with your clients where they're like, yeah, but it's vulnerable to make that decision? And like, what do you do in that moment? You just
Yeah. It I mean, because I think this is like the central question that we come back to again and again if we're trying to like create a life, or an outcome or a desire or whatever. um and I don't think we always even acknowledge how vulnerable it is, so I'm really glad you're putting that word to it.
well, I almost feel like it's necessary, meaning like that's to not I think the acknowledgement of the fact that it's vulnerable in itself is part of the like healing and expansion process. I don't know
Yeah.
why I feel like that's important
Yeah.
because you can't you have to be willing to lose something.
Mm.
Or is that a really like I don't know, is that a limited belief?
I think of it as like, sometimes I think of it as like free falling. Like, am I willing to just leap in without restriction
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
see what happens, trusting that I'm creating something on the other side,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um
think that sounds a lot because this idea of like I don't think you have to lose anything. This isn't like a self-punishing experiment. I just think that you have to be willing to take the leap to
and you
risk.
I mean, because the thing I think you have to be willing to lose is like whatever you're holding on to so tightly. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
like like so go ahead.
Okay, so this is what I meant by paradox. I think the thing that we need to be willing to lose is to I don't know why this is coming up, but I think I need to be willing to lose that what I'm holding on to so tightly is that it has to work, that it has to be tens of thousands of followers. I think what I need to let go of is like, and also the paradox is let go of that having to be it.
So, okay, I completely agree. And I think that's true for both of us. My question for both of us is why? What happens? What is the fear or the story underneath? I said I wanted tens of thousands of listeners and it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like,
That's the yeah.
what that's the thing. Something's lost there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the question. That's a yep. And I think the thing would be like, oh, it means that God, it means so many things. It means again, yeah, this is a question of like maybe this isn't enough. And that we have to go back to the like hustling of like the strategic little nitty-gritty pieces. And that it means that we can't trust this. And it means that magic isn't real.
Okay, so this is really interesting because you know what, for me, it's one very simple thing.
Uh-huh.
And the fear, it means I'm not actually powerful.
Mm.
That's the fear. All those other things, like it's that I'm not, that's the fear is like, if I put all my chips on the table, if I declare like, okay, Hello Universe has tens of thousands of listeners, done. And, you know, 5 years from now, we have the same number of listeners that we do now, which we fucking love you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And uh the fear, which is a lot quieter than it used to be because this is the space that I'm constantly like working. But the fear is that I'm not actually that I can't actually trust myself to be a powerful like being and creator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what I hear your stories were like many, but I
But
feel
they're
like
kind of they all fall all under that umbrella. Especially
is it
the magic's not real part.
yeah, so I guess my question is it for you, is it that you're not powerful, or is it that like the universe doesn't work the way you think it does?
Oh, yeah, good distinction. It's that the universe doesn't. It's like the universe is kind of like unsafe because it doesn't work the way that I think that it does.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
almost like my understanding of reality would be jeopardized.
Yeah. Right. So for me, it's like trust in myself. And for you, it's like trust in the universe.
God. Yeah.
God. Yeah.
But the thing is, this makes sense to me that like I'm so happy that you asked this question, right? Because we need to be able to look at the scariest piece. And of course, this is the question because that's the paradox is like, and I don't know, I like can't explain it right now, but I think like you've spoken to this directly, this idea of like we need to let go. If we're willing to actually like the irony is if we can let go of the story that for me that the universe has to work in a certain way, that's actually going to give me the exact thing that I want. Like there's some irony there. And
right, yeah. Exact same thing here, right? Like my any ways in which I don't have total faith in myself is literally the only thing that's standing between me and whatever I'm trying to create, right? It is just the experience of fear that I can't create that's in the way of the creating. And then how can I respond to that with like, that's where the disgust came up. That was like, oh my God, just fucking get over yourself. Right. Which is not like, I needed to just feel that in the moment, but like, how do I meet that with like compassion and not making it right or wrong? So I guess the question too is like, how do you meet that fear in a way that is like helpful? like your fear, you know?
It's, well, for me, I don't know the answer that comes up, and I don't know if this is my go-to. I don't know if this is the answer, but my go-to is usually like, yeah, of course the universe doesn't work the way that I think it works. Like meaning it's the letting go of needing to understand and it being a certain way. It isn't it. I don't know, for me in this particular instance that it's about like love and compassion. It's about, you know, what I feel like you talk about often is let go of the story that the universe is supposed to work that way, and actually I will be given
surprised and delighted
the opportunity to see something actually much bigger than even that, because that's actually a very limited story. It's so when you're asking me what do I need to let go of, it's my understanding of everything. It is literally my understanding of reality itself.
Which is like literally your path to spiritual awakening, right? Is like, how much more can I let go of thinking that I know anything?
Exactly. Which is also, which is like something that we both talk about all the time. Your whole thing about like, nothing's real.
Nothing's real. I knew where you were going.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, how people have like it's been like 500 days since there's been an accident on site. We were like, it's been one episode since Kylie's talking about nothing.
Yeah. So that's like for me, like, and I think it might be a little bit different for you, but just as a template, I guess, is like, this is just such a trippy metaphysical conversation where it is paradox. It's like, well, you asked us like, you asked me like, what do I need to let go of? And so it's like, what am I so attached to? What am I so afraid of? Like, well, if it doesn't work, I'm making it mean this, that that the universe isn't safe, that I can't trust God. And I have to kind of be like, well, what if I can't trust it to work exactly the way that I want it to work? Can it work out? That, I mean, that's it. I don't know what the answer is, but I just know that that's what I need to like live in. I don't know.
Yeah. One thing, there was something that, again, something like floated in and floated out. Hold on, Jennifer, I need a minute to think. Okay. Can you say what you were saying again?
I can try. My brain isn't going to hold. My brain isn't holding on to much right now. I was talking about how you asked a very relevant question. Like the heart of it is like, what are we afraid of is going to happen if it doesn't work out? And I said, for me, it's that the universe doesn't make sense. It's not organized the way that I think that it is, and I can't trust God. And the paradox is like, that's the thing that I need to let go of. That to live in the what I call the I don't know mind. Like I don't know. I don't know if it works the way, but if I can actually let go instead of needing to think about that in that very small box, I can open myself up to a world of possibilities and have access actually to a way of seeing things that I didn't even have access to before.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm making notes.
This is really, I just have to say, this is really interesting because this is like, you're helping me work out stuff that I've come up against often.
Yeah, same. Okay, Jennifer, I'm back. We're back. Thank you. Okay, so I have so much to say about that that I literally made us pause so I could take notes. So the first thing that I want to say is that when you just said, you know, what if the universe doesn't work the way I think it does? And you said, but of course it doesn't work that way. I just want to like go back to that point because I think that's so fucking great, which is like, yeah, of course it doesn't fucking work the way we have these teeny tiny human brains and we're literally like grappling with infinite space and expansion, and like, of course it doesn't work the way we think it does. How absurd that we think that we've fucking figured out anything. So I love, like, there's such like play in that of like, the assignment is not to fucking solve the Rubik's Cube of the universe, you know? So thank you for that. That's a real gift. And then you also said like, the underlying fear is ultimately like that I can't trust God. And so you were rightly pointing out like, so I have to be, basically that's the bet I have to be willing to make, right? Is like, and the other thing that comes up to in my mind is like, also what that means is that you are hungry on a deep level to actually be able to trust God fully. God, the universe, divine. Like the actual hunger at the heart of everything is like, can I fully surrender to trusting God, source, divine? And perhaps one of the ways you've been trying to like understand is to like figure it out and solve the puzzle, right? But ultimately the hunger is, can I trust God? And so on the one hand, yeah, how can you like let go and be less attached? And also, how can you give yourself the felt experience of that trust? Because you're hungry for it. It's a want.
Yeah. I mean, I already know the answer. I already know the answer because I've fucking been here before. And again, this is actually a conversation that I have with my clients because it comes back to safety. When I say like I want to trust God, it's because I need to feel like safe.
Yeah,
they're the same thing. So this is an answer specifically for myself. I don't think that this is a prescription that needs to go for it because I can only speak for myself. But because my life's work is so often about cultivating safety, and I almost feel like it only comes from one place, which is some place that I don't even have language for, but and yet the thing that we spend hours talking about. So I already know where I get safety from, and I feel like very lucky about that. But I get that from being in deep connection with myself, in a place of stillness, in a place of presence, in a place of being in my body, in a place of not thinking and simply being.
Yeah.
And I have like, yeah, I mean, yeah, this just all makes a lot of sense because of course I don't like feel safe, and therefore of course I will spend a lot of time trying to understand the ultimate reality of what safety is. And for me, that I've just learned already. Well, obviously I haven't learned because it still comes back. Like it never comes from outside of me and I know that because it's happened a million times where I actually am safe. Like I'm literally safe right now as I'm worrying about like my business and like numbers and blah, blah, blah. But like I am safe, but I don't yet feel safe because even if all of the circumstances stacked up and I had everything that I need, which I actually do, I still don't feel safe. So that shows me that it's like an internal thing.
And also that's the infinite lesson. Right? Like, so there isn't, I don't think, a place where you actually are like, oh, and now I've like mastered feeling safe in my body, like feeling safe because, and recognizing that safety comes from within, because I think that's these are infinite lessons.
Yeah.
You know?
And I don't even have language for it really when I say, oh, like what, I don't want to like make it sound flippant and be like, oh, I know exactly where safety comes from. And it's like, but it's a felt experience.
Yeah. Right.
That
no,
is,
I understand. I had my own understanding of what my felt experience is when you said that.
Yeah. That's like beyond the mind.
And I will also share like whenever the story that comes up for me is about not being able to trust God, it's also always about safety.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if maybe that those two themes are linked more than, because I also thought that was just like my personal journey, but those two, that's always what it's actually about. Like, is the universe a benevolent place? Where there's a safe place. And then the third thing that I noted is actually to like kind of you already gave yourself an answer, but to kind of take a page out of your own book of like something that's like practical, is I feel like because you asked like what for a client who might be saying like, I don't know if it's a really vulnerable thing, I don't know if I can like if I can trust, the thing that I like to think about is like holding gently, which is something I've talked about on the podcast before. But like when I am clinging to the fear, I over identify with it. And then I'm just perseverating on it, which shows up as like worry, overthinking, like despair, or I reject it and I'm like, I shouldn't feel this way, or I just completely ignore it, or what have you. And neither of those are helpful. And so instead, I just try to just like I was saying earlier in the episode, just like literally just observe, like,
Mm.
oh, like, hi, disgust, that's interesting, you're new, and just
Mhm.
let it exist without making it right or wrong. And just like, I literally right now I'm like cupping my hands together like I used to get communion, because
Mhm.
that's like to me the like energy of it, which is like it's in my hands but also I'm holding it gently.
Mhm.
And that, much like you were saying, like you have a felt sense for safety, I have a felt sense in my body of what it means when I'm holding something gently. And so whenever a story shows up that is not particularly helpful, you could say, or like nourishing for me, one of the first things I try to do is just like ask myself how I can hold it gently.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 I think that's really helpful. Yeah. And I think that's helpful instead of being like, here's the 1, 2, 3 steps of like, okay, and more grasping. That just leads to more grasping. What you're
Yeah.
saying is like, live intimately with it, like observe it, make room for it, and then see how it unfolds from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And intimately doesn't have to mean like get all up in its business, right? Because that can be like our attempt to fix it, right?
Yeah.
But instead just like let
Yeah.
it exist and know that in observing it, it's already begun to
Yeah.
shift and
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to come back to you though, because I feel like we unraveled this idea. So my fear of like, not trusting God, and yours was that if we don't get these tens of thousands of followers, that it means that you are not actually powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we spend some time unpacking that?
Sure. Um, you once said something really helpful where I was talking about like we often either struggle with trust in self or trust in God. I was saying that you were like, or there's trust in self as God.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh fuck. Yeah, that's what I think this fear is, right? And I also like, I think these are just like, I think you just cycle through all three of these, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
on the carousel. I am currently at
Yeah.
self as God. um uh and so I think that's what the fear is.
So I think asking the same question to you, right? Is that where we're at? This idea of like how,
What's lost if I yeah,
yeah, what's
sorry, go ahead.
lost? Yeah, what's lost if you feel like you can't trust as in self as God.
Mm. I'm sorry. It's also fucking safety. Son of a bitch.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Wow, that's really
Oh,
interesting. Oh wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Let
Can you
me feel
explain?
into it for a second.
Yeah, can you explain that a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. It is slightly more than safety, although it's not that dissimilar. It's this sense of like, for me in this moment, it's this sense of like, can I have more than enough?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, because right, we have enough listeners,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, can I? It's almost like, okay, God will give me what I need, and here I am being like, fucking great, give me more. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
want it all. I want to be like, right, like this, like, who am I to be ultimate creator, right? Who am I to be like, I get all of the listeners because I
Yeah.
just fucking want them, not because
Yeah.
I need them, not because
Mhm.
there's a problem to solve, but I just think it'd be fucking cool.
Yeah. Who am I to want more? Who am I
Who am I to want?
deserve more?
And like, and also like, who am I to want so much more?
Mm.
Mm.
Which I think speaks to the story that you've brought up a couple of times of like, yeah, I can tap into this feeling of like, yeah, you can have your needs met, but like, oh my God, am I doomed to a life of only being able to have just enough and I can't actually ever have more than that? And that's like a really scary feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm
And
really good at creating my backs against the wall. And I was like joking with someone, like I was toying with going to a retreat next month, which ultimately the timing doesn't work out. And I was laughing because I was like, oh yeah, I would make an extra $2,000 in my business this month if I signed up for that retreat, because I would then have created a need. Like that's how consistently my relationship is to
oh,
like, I can create what I need. So if I create the need,
oh,
like I
then
literally would,
you'll get what
then
you
I,
want.
then I like, but I would have to like create this like slightly tense,
Yeah,
stretched
you need to create
situation.
need. You can't just
Right. I
without
can't just have
have
it.
without need.
Yeah.
And that is a very, I would kind of completely understandable, like an unsafe way to live. Like you need to be in a constant state of not, almost like, yeah, not enough need.
Yeah. Which is like completely like made up, right? Like obviously the retreat is completely extra and a like beautiful indulgence, right? It's not uh it's a creation of scarcity rather than a like
Right. But I
reality
think
of
that's
it.
like really interesting to me because that's obviously, yeah, like that just to me, like can run, that just runs really deep because I feel like
Yeah.
that must come from the sense of like need is more comfortable to you than, and I don't know if that's like a childhood thing or whatever, but like it's more comfortable for you to be in need than to actually just have
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
And to have excess is
Excellent
like
to have access. Yeah.
excess is yeah, it's uncomfortable, which is not new information, and also somehow I'm receiving it as new. Do you know how that can happen?
Yeah. All the time. I mean, we've talked, I think it's in a way, I would even, maybe I would say we just go deeper. We get to
Yeah.
go deeper, deeper.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I don't think I had connected that this like being like embodying deeper myself as creator or myself as God or whatever is, which again, like literally all of us are. This isn't a Kyley Caldwell specialty, right? Um, I don't think I had realized that it was linked to excess and like excess being acceptable.
Mm.
And that
So,
therefore pathway, the pathway like comfort in that is actually comfort in. Okay, good. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
well, just to ask, I mean, I think this is like almost like we're offering kind of like a framework of like, okay, so this is what the fear is pointing to, that like, can't trust in Kyley as God, self as God, which means that it is a thing of safety, but I think your safety is really directly tied to this idea of like not needing to have need, but also like it's you can never have excess, and that
It's
somehow like.
unsafe to have more than you need. That's actually what's
But
coming up.
I think I
Is
have to be
actually,
curious, like, what do you mean by when you say it's unsafe to have more than you? Like, what does that like? Why?
I
Because it
don't.
means
That's what's.
what? What do you make it mean?
I can't explain it. It is like a felt sense of like real discomfort. Like that it feels oh, it feels dangerous because if you have more, oh, ooh, high tears. If you have more than you need, you're not on alert anymore.
Hmm.
Like I'm like you're not out on the hunt. Like I'm literally like seeing like a pack of lions.
Mm-hmm.
If you have more than you need, you get fat and lazy. And then all of a sudden, danger comes and you're not prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
I think you're speaking to something really important in that, like, sometimes I think it's people who've experienced trauma, or it doesn't have to be trauma. It's this belief that like it actually feels unsafe to be safe. because we're
Yeah.
so used to, like, our norm is actually to be on the hunt. And so that's where our state is regulated at.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so uncomfortable, actually. And we don't trust that, because like you said, then it means I'm actually vulnerable. Like if I'm not constantly on the defense, if I'm not like a wolf protecting myself,
Then,
constantly on high alert,
yeah,
I'm
then
vulnerable.
disaster strikes and I
Yeah.
will be unprepared. Wow. I'm also laughing because this is the conversation I've had with like 4 clients this week.
Well, it all makes sense. Yeah, of course, that this would all come
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Whoa. Mm.
So what do you
Mm.
want to do with that, Kyley Caldwell?
Mm.
Actually, can I actually stop and just ask how you're feeling?
Yeah. It just feels very like, um, it's interesting. Like, I feel like we have fallen into a really deep place, and I'm really grateful for that. And so I'm having lots of like, this feels very felt in my body, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this whole conversation has felt like I can like feel like things shifting in my body,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, and I feel really grateful because this question is something that annoyed by. Right? Earlier in the podcast, I referenced this sense of disgust, right? Because I'm like, I don't. I'm just annoyed by your existence,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, because I don't get what you are telling me, and therefore I want you to go away,
Mm-hmm.
right?
But also, this is the stuff that we know. This is the
Yeah,
monster. Like,
yeah,
let's.
yeah. Yeah. And also like the disgust that I felt yesterday was also really beautiful because I was like, oh, like you're there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me that I had to witness the disgust to get to what was underneath it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't think I have been anything. mm. I also feel like I'm receiving something that I don't even fully understand. Like, you know how like when you feel things shifting and you're like, I don't even fully know what's getting reordered inside of me in
Mm-hmm.
this moment
Yeah.
of witnessing something and therefore unlocking it.
I
Um,
do some things sometimes it just takes more time. Like it's gonna,
yeah.
more time beyond this podcast episode that will then continue to percolate.
I'm also marveling at like when we first met and you were my meditation coach, my then waning relationship with anxiety was like one of the big things that we returned to.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is really interesting because this is basically the same thread, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
like, in what ways are you required? Like that's anxiety is a story of like you are required to be on high alert all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I'm no longer someone with an anxiety disorder, like it's interesting to observe again, just like the ever unfolding that like it continues to be a story of like, is it safe to exist in the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's really the question that's being asked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think there's something like the question that comes to mind for me is also like, it's going back to the analogy of like a pack of wolves be on high alert. That's the norm. And so it actually doesn't like feel like um when we are provided for, when we have more than enough, like it doesn't feel safe to just, to be in that rested, relaxed state. I guess my curiosity is like, when has that showed up in your life before? Like, was there a moment, is there a reason that you feel that way, that there was a time in your life where it actually, you were safe, or you felt rested, or you felt like you were the resting wolf, and then actually um you ended up getting hurt? And this could be like past life stuff. Yeah, that's kind of
I,
where my mind goes.
I think I think it's, well, 2 things that I'll observe. One is that what's interesting is I think as we're unpacking this, I'm realizing that it's also sliding right back into trust in God and the universe, because what I'm actually afraid of is like that like I will have created something beautiful for myself, and then the universe is going to come along and fuck it up on me. Right? Like, send the shit in. And so that's interesting to observe, right? That these are like false distinctions of these three different buckets. I think so so I could tell a story about childhood and like nervous system and safety not being consistent, and therefore like safety in terms of like emotional, like people arguing around me a lot. And I actually want to go zoom out even a bit more, which is to say, this is the central tension of being human, which is that it actually isn't safe because we are all in a process of dying. Right? And so like we are asking ourselves to soften into, yes, the universe is safe, while knowing that we are dying.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just I love this conversation, and we're like 2 hours into this conversation.
I know,
so
we're gonna have to
like,
break this into 2 episodes.
Yeah, we're gonna have to wrap this up, but like this speaks to me. I love that you're bringing it out here to the more like big picture life stuff, and I think this is where like a lot of I immediately I can't help but like be brought into like Buddhism, which is this idea of like can we, it's not like you need to be with your feelings of like death and like actually be afraid of death. Don't try to not be afraid of death. But I think it's like, I think in Buddhism, they often talk about like, this is the truth of our reality. That like, we are dying the moment we are born. And actually, if we can making peace with that is actually enlightenment. And I think that is the journey that we are on, of like, and making peace with that also entails being with the discomfort of that, because that's like the paradox of it all. But you're asking like the big life question of like, of course we feel this way, of course we do, because that's such a human thing.
That's the central paradox. Yeah.
And it's how do we want to choose to navigate that?
Well, and I think you're also giving me something really beautiful, which is like, maybe safety isn't the right word, because it's in some part of us is like, well, that's a fucking lie. Right? And maybe there's something really beautiful about like, I don't know if peace is the word that's resonating with you in the moment, but maybe there's maybe safety is the red herring. I don't know. I'm just like experimenting with this, because what I'm thinking is like, control is the energy of like, I the resting wolf, and then like disaster struck. It's funny that I'm also we're picking an apex predator who's like set by, I don't know what the disaster is, probably humans, let's be real. I'm like, I'm the resting wolf, and like disaster strikes. And also, and it is actually a lie to say like, well, disaster won't ever strike, right? Just be like your creator God, and therefore disaster will never strike, because like, I mean, at the very least, you're going to die at some point, right? And so maybe it's actually falling into like, and this feels very Buddhist, like, yeah, of course things are going to get changed. Things are going to change. Of course the rug's going to get pulled out from underneath you. And also that is okay, and you are okay.
I will always come back to this meme. I've referenced it already before. I just think it's so good. The one, there's a meme that says like, the Buddha was the first guy to say it really do be like that sometimes. like that was what I don't know if you remember, but one of the podcasts that you and I did was all about how I got this cat and then I had to give him away, and I was really sad, and I was like, the whole thing just seemed like pointless. And and that was one of those moments where I was like, it wasn't even that there was, and I was like, there was no lesson. Ironically, there was, but the lesson itself was like, some shit happens. Like, this is it. And it's actually our acceptance of that actually sets us free, rather than not wanting to get hurt, avoiding like, shit do be like that. Like, that is it.
And in the like wild game of paradox, the way to like embody that you are creator is to accept is to accept that you're not actually in control.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like you can create anything that you're willing to experience as long as you at the same time recognize that you have no fucking control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Which is like, I'm not surprised, like, meaning like both of us are in this place where like we have to accept the paradox of like, my whole thing was like, oh, I need to let go of I want things to work some way, and the way that I get there is to let go of it needing to work that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like with my God self is one that recognizes that I can like let go of needing to be the some idea of some story of what my God self is supposed to be like.
And also, like, you don't need to understand how the universe works because you are the fucking universe. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a business meeting at Hello Universe.
I mean, honestly, I don't even know what to say, because I wasn't expecting really to go. I mean, I didn't know where we were going to go. And to be honest, I'm not even sure where we've landed. Because I think it might take some more processing. But I don't know. I do think there's something here though. It's this idea of like, it's kind of like, we have both of our beliefs. There's like are connected. They're a little bit separate, but they're kind of connected. And I think it's about like the way that I'm seeing it right now, just to sort of like, I want to kind of organize this for you and I in terms of like, how do we, if this is a business meeting, how do we want to like move forward with all of this? It's like, I feel like I need to, for me, I feel like I need to stand in this, in my own, in all of this. And and like, but really like, not just, but like come to a place, and this is an ongoing thing, but like of embodying. Cause like here, for a perfect example, even as we were having this conversation, I was like, oh my God, this conversation is getting really long. Like, are people even like, I just started having these like stories of like, who are we to have this like long ass conversation? Like, this is boring as shit. I don't know. And I had to be like, wait, I'm just going to trust that this is okay. Like, and that like, this is enough. And not that everyone's gonna, I don't, I can go into a whole story about what that even means. Right. But like, and to trust that. And that is actually for me, like a nervous system reset. Like when I talk about nervous system reset, it's like, instead of going down that rabbit hole of like, blah, 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 it's like, this is actually uncomfortable. This new thing that I'm saying about like, this is enough is actually uncomfortable, but can I actually bring my complete presence here and like, let that be okay? And I can expand this capacity of like, oh, it's a little bit uncomfortable for me to just own who I am and who I be and how I'm going to show up in this moment. And but I can do that.
Oh, I love that. Yes. I really love the way that you said that. I talk about it sometimes as like acting as if, like I'm going to act as if it's okay. Not as a form of gaslighting, but as like, I'm trying on this costume. How does it fit? Do I like it? Because then I get out of the, like, it has to be this way. I get out, like, I'm not grasping. And then once I put the costume on, I'm like, oh, this is a way better costume. Yeah. Okay, we're keeping it.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And yes, I agree. I feel like, I mean, I can, like I said, I can already feel things shifting internally. And also I can feel the part of me that wants to just like you said, sit in this, right? Something has revealed itself for each of us, and also for what we're creating together. And also we don't have to fully understand what has shifted, right? And so
that's interesting. I feel I can feel myself wanting to understand and being like, so then let's also like put a nice neat bow around this so that we can like make it helpful.
Oh,
but really but I do think that you're right. That I think sometimes what is also helpful is just the redirection of remembering that, well, if you believe anyway that that's how it works, that like things are already starting to shift.
Yeah.
Just in having the conversation and bringing it into awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we get to witness the unfolding. that's what I'm actually really excited about, is like there's so many different gifts that showed up here in terms of like things that shifted for each of us personally, and also like in declaring our intention and like kind of clearing out some clutter story and energetic wise about like what it means for the show to really expand. And so I'm really excited about like, yeah, just witnessing the unfolding. Like, how do we each feel tomorrow that's different from today? And what like invitation drops into our Hello Universe email address, 2 weeks from now, that like, surprises and delights us. Like, yeah, I feel like just excited to, which is not to say we can't come back and digest further, but in this moment, I just feel.
I mean, I'm being honest, I think I might have to.
Yeah.
I might I think there might be like more in this conversation. But just so that we're on the same page, the way that I'm understanding is like we show up for this, we sit in this and see how it unfolds. But my understanding of it is like, this is my commitment to like, if I want to grow this podcast to 10, because like there's still the goal. The goal is still like tens of thousands of listeners, right? But my way of doing that is to practice and embody my piece that I just talked about of like, all the stuff about safety and not trusting God, and then also not needing to like understand God working in that way. Kind of just, it is a kind of a leap and a letting go of.
Okay, so our tens of thousands of listeners already exist. We did like, we spoke them into existence. Our desire created them. They literally already exist. We are now in the process of watching it unfold, because time isn't real. And so as humans, we create time because it is more pleasant to watch something unfold than just to have everything instantly. How fucking boring would that be? Right? Like, to be honest, like it would be fun for a moment if tomorrow there were 10,000 listeners, but we enjoy the experience of unfolding, right?
Yeah.
So like the embodying of everything we're talking about is a process we relish. So we've created for ourselves a playground in which we get to relish that unfolding. And at any moment, we can dial up or down the time. Right? If we're like, okay, this is going on too long, like, come on, tens of thousands of listeners, then we get to like dial up. This is the like creator God stuff, right? Then we get to like dial up the time, speed the timeline, right? Because time isn't real. And so they already exist. And we're just in the process of allowing ourselves to like discover what pathway we're creating for them to show up.
I love that. Okay. And this might be part of the pathway, but sorry, to be clear. So in my mind though, this mitigates the other question of like, oh, but how do we actually make the podcast work? Do we need to do XYZ? Do we need to like hire a person to do these things? Like my hope actually is like my understanding anyway, the way that I'm operating is like everything that we just talked about trumps that. Like we don't need to worry about that right now. But part of the process might be actually that we end up getting an idea that speaks to to these things, and then it'll unfold and all that stuff. But like the primary thing is what we just talked about.
I think the primary thing is what we just accomplished. And then we also, in like clarifying our desire, we also make space for, again, the 10,000 listeners or tens of thousands of listeners already exist. And we have created space for like, it would not surprise me if like 2 weeks from now we get an idea that we're like, that would be so much fun and super easy. And our team already is going to be able to execute on it with like with a great amount of ease. Like, let's just go, all systems go. Right.
Yeah.
And that would not surprise me at all, which is not to say that doing doesn't get to exist, but it just the kind of doing that we are going to enjoy gets to show up,
right? And it's gonna be fully in line with what the conversation that we just had, instead of from a place of like grasping,
right,
intellectual understanding, blah blah blah. Okay, cool. Woo, that was a fucking ride.
This is so much fun. This is like the best.
That was like, I mean, you said that like that people might be getting a sense of like how our coaching normally is. I would say that is not what my coaching is like, because that to me was really like, I don't even know. I was just, I don't know. I don't know what that was, but
Oh, that's what my coaching's like.
that is not, I feel like my coaching is a little bit more, I don't know. I think it feels like that. The feeling is like that. But for me, that was very confusing for a little bit. And
Oh,
then like
that's
it came back.
true. Yes, because I think that part where we both like felt like things kept flitting in and out, I think it's because what we were actually touching into is way more than our cute little human brains can understand.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to hold on to, we were trying to like move and swim in the energy of something that is bigger than language.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why, yeah, for a little while in the middle, it was
Yeah. A little
like a hazy
touch and go there for a second,
Yeah.
but like in a good, but in a good way.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Woo. All right, friend.
Thank you.
I love you.
Should we do joy?
Yeah, sure. All right. Let's make this an official podcast. I mean, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
this is an official
Yeah.
podcast episode. Um, there's so many things right now. Can I have a second to think?
Yeah.
Because I just, yeah.
I'm gonna actually pee again while you think.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Jennifer. We just took a little break. All right. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
All right. Okay. What's one thing that's bringing you joy? Kyley Caldwell.
I just was in Miami for 4 days without my delightful children and just with my husband. And it was so great. It was so great. We sat on the beach, we sat at the pool, we ate super delicious food because Nick really enjoys researching before he, like, as part of his travel excitement. So he always has managed to find like the best fucking restaurants. And
That's totally me too. I do the same.
oh my gosh, Adam and I are the luckiest. And I read a whole book.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it just, and I mean, it was really nice to be in the warm weather. It was really nice to go to like delicious restaurants and be on the beach and all this. I went skinny dipping at night.
Oh my God, yes.
And my
Good for
amazing
you.
husband just held my bra. He's like not a skinny dipping person. And I was like, I'm so happy to be married to someone who is like, all right, do your thing. And also is just like holding my clothes to keep them dry.
I'm jealous. That sounds so nice. Like, how warm was the water? Like, how was it? Like,
it was really windy, so it wasn't quite as warm as I really wanted it to be bath water warm, and it was not quite that warm. But
still,
and
sounds
like,
amazing.
I mean, I've said that shared some podcasts before, but like the ocean is like, the ocean is my favorite place in the whole fucking world, especially when there's like a privacy to the ocean. So like in the fall or when there's a storm or in the evening, like I love the beach on a warm sunny day, but there's a special, like, it almost makes me cry every time when I'm at the ocean when there's like a wildness to her. And so that's how it was, because there was like kind of big waves and it was dark and it was nighttime. And oh my God, I like literally started to cry as soon as we walked onto the beach that night.
Oh my God, I
So
completely understand that. That
it
sounds
felt
amazing.
really, really, really good. And then we went and ate like the best fried chicken ever. It was like really great.
Oh,
Really
that
great.
sounds so nice.
And I got to talk to my husband for more than like 5 fucking minutes.
Yeah, you guys got to catch up and spend some quality time together.
Yeah. So our trip was the best, and that
Wait, so did
continues
it
to
feel like
progress.
relaxing? Like what feelings would you if you could name 3 feelings? I kind of like want to be on that vacation with you. So I'm like,
Yeah.
what did it feel like?
It felt really, 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 really lovely, and to be like connected to my husband and like actually like
Yeah.
be in conversation and like close, and like we were walking and holding hands, and I was like, I don't remember the last time I walked and held your hand, because we're always holding our kids' hands,
Yeah, totally.
right?
Mhm.
Like, and we've also always like we've always held hands. So there were all these little things of just like being connected
Mhm.
that are hard when you have
Yeah.
small kids, and I work a lot in the evenings and all those things. So that is not an answer to your question, but also it
But
just
no,
felt
no,
like
it does. Was it
I felt
relaxing?
it felt really really relaxing, and it felt really like I felt really like emotionally nourished
Mhm.
by being in connection. And also it felt really indulgent because I like
Mm,
slept late, and the
yes.
coffee in Miami is so fucking good. And I just drank like 7
Yeah,
coffees a
yes,
day, and the
yes.
food was really good. And so yeah, restful, connected, and indulgent.
That's what I want for you. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I also just want to say, I'm so happy that you do this, because I think it's really important for relationships when you have kids to like prioritize and like put an effort to like find
Yeah.
this time, because yeah, I just think, at least from what I've heard, is that once you have kids, it's so hard, but then it can take a toll in the relationship,
Yeah.
and but because I think ultimately you two having this time for yourselves is helpful for everyone,
Oh,
like
yeah,
your kids and
absolutely.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel extremely lucky that we have, you know, 4 amazing grandparents who are always willing to watch our kids, and that we are in a like financial position to be able to take a trip away. Like I
Yeah.
feel really, really, really grateful, because it was it was it was a real gift
Yeah.
and
Yay.
incredibly
I'm
nourishing.
so
So
happy for you. Yeah, your
yeah.
pictures looked amazing. Your food
Yeah.
pictures.
Also, I love Miami. I just think it's a hilarious Miami Beach is such a hilarious and weird and
I want
delightful
to go.
place that I
I
love it.
want to go. I've never been.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I will share my joy. There's kind of 2 things connected. I think I may have shared this last time as I was in Taiwan, but my parents live in like the part of Taiwan, Taipei, called Beito, where they have hot springs. It's just like natural hot
Mm,
springs are here. And it's actually why my parents moved here, because they wanted to be, because my dad and my mom both love taking like really hot baths. So
mm.
um it like kind of smells like sulfur sometimes around here, because like that's but not all the time. Anyway, so we go to these hot springs whenever I come back, which I fucking love. So the hot springs in Taiwan, by the way, are naked. So like everyone's naked, and there's no chlorine. It's all like natural
Love
water.
that the
So
theme of our joy is naked
naked. I know.
swimming.
I was
This
thinking
is
that too. I was
great.
thinking that too. So that in itself is just such a fucking treat. Like in terms of just like water being purifying. And so like the water is like this natural hot spring water. And then they also have a cold bath though. So they go back and forth. And it's just like this whole bougie experience. There's like a sauna. And I think what I really love is just being naked, like with people who don't give a fuck. Like,
Yes.
and I don't feel like we have a lot of that in America. Like I've been to spas before, but you always have to wear a bathing suit.
I was a member at this gym in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that was like women's only gym.
Mhm.
And something about that made it have a culture of like, I don't know, the dressing room at this one particular gym, because there were other chains in Boston that didn't
Yeah.
have this vibe, but everyone just fucking walked around butt naked the
Yes.
whole time.
Yes.
And I remember my friend being like, yeah, I like the healthworks, but why is everyone naked? And I was like, that's like my favorite part.
Yeah. I I think yes. Go ahead.
It was the first time in my probably the only time in my life that I was just around a bunch of people who were just like, yeah, I'm fucking naked, no big deal.
Totally, exactly. That's what it
Yeah.
is. And I think it's particularly easy in Asia because at these hot springs, it's a lot of like older people. So you see a lot of like old grannies, and like you see a whole diverse range of people, like kids as well. It's like kids and like and like whatever, and like people my age or younger, but also like grannies and moms, and it's just like such a diverse array of bodies where no one cares, that it actually makes you feel more comfortable about your body,
Yes.
because like literally no one cares. So
Right.
that's my joy. But actually the thing that I wanted to add on to that was that like, so in Asian culture, if you are I'm curious to know if like if you are listening to this and you have like Asian parents who do the same thing, I would love to know, because I think a lot of people know what I'm talking about. It is very common and acceptable and normal for people to comment on your weight. So how people actually greet you in like Taiwanese culture is like, oh, you've gained weight or you've lost weight. It's just like the thing that people say. And I think in sometimes I think that's it's a good thing, because it's a sign that like actually it doesn't carry as much meaning here as it does.
Question.
Yeah, it's like very casual and people joke about it and they'll ask you how much you weigh. It's like not as much of a big deal. But with my mother and so many Asian parents, is like they are constantly telling you about your body, if you've gained weight, if you've lost weight, like blah 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 blah. Like, and my mom is one of those women who I think a lot of people of her generation, I just, remember, since I was young, I've always heard her talk about wanting to lose weight. She grew up in the generation where, I don't know, I don't want to speak for everyone, but she's just constantly being like, oh, I need to lose weight, I need to eat less, working out. It was always a thing for her. And so every time I come back and we go to these hot springs together, we're naked, she'll like be like, oh, you've gained weight, or she'll say something, even if it's positive, but mostly it's negative. And I just told her like really directly, completely non-defensively, because I wasn't defensive. I was just like, Mom, you're no longer allowed to comment on my body. She's like, this is just no longer a thing that you're allowed to do. And she was totally accepting of it. I think I kind of explained it to her. I was like, we're in a different generation now. I think like I'm like really like at peace with my body, and you should be really like happy for me, because I think that's like not a good place, not a place that everyone gets to be. And it wasn't like an argumentative conversation, because I knew she wasn't necessarily coming from a place of negativity. But that just felt like a really nice, clear boundary.
I love that. And I love that you could witness that your mother her intention wasn't hurtful. So there could be some space there, while also like respecting, like you get to have the boundary, just because her intention isn't hurtful, like your boundary gets to exist. And like, and therefore it's uncomplicated, even though it doesn't always show up that way. So she just has, I mean, I feel, if anything, I feel really bad for my mom, because I think she has some really warped ideas of body stuff. Like she wanted me to go get liposuction. Like that's her, she's got some warped views on, I think, like body image. And so I feel bad for her, because I think she's been in that trap her entire life. It kind of sucks. I mean, and also she's also very overweight, by the way. So I don't know if that, so I think that's why it sucks for her. So she's trapped in this thing, but she's obsessed with her weight, and she's also I wouldn't say she's obese, but she's quite right. Yeah. So anyway, that's my joy. I love your boundary setting.
Thank you. All right, friends,
till our next naked swim party.